I found the listing on a Tuesday night. A decent camera, the kind I'd been looking for, listed for about a third of what it would cost new. The photos showed it in good condition, no obvious damage, and the seller had decent feedback on his profile. I sent a message and he replied within the hour. His name was Ryan, casual enough in his messages, said he was upgrading to a newer model and just needed it gone. We agreed on a price and sorted out a time for me to come and collect it that weekend. He lived about half an hour away in a normal enough area, a quiet street, terraced houses, cars parked either side. I knocked and he answered pretty quickly. Late 20s, normal looking, tracksuit, seemed relaxed. He invited me in to test the camera before I paid, which I thought was fair enough. I sat on his sofa and went through the settings and took a few test shots while he sat across from me and scrolled on his phone. Everything seemed fine. I paid him cash. He threw in the bag and an extra battery without me asking, and I left. The whole thing took maybe 15 minutes. I got home, put the camera on the table, and made myself a coffee. Later that evening, I sat down and went through it more carefully, checking the settings, resetting everything to default the way I usually do with second-hand kit. When I went into the internal memory to format the card and wipe it clean, I noticed there were files on there already. Not photos, video files, about a dozen of them. I nearly deleted them without looking, which is what I should have done. But I opened one. It was a video filmed inside a house, handheld, moving through rooms slowly. Whoever was filming wasn't speaking, just walking through what looked like someone's home, going room to room, filming everything. The living room, the kitchen, the hallway, the stairs. Filming the windows, the locks on the back door, the layout of the rooms, then upstairs into the bedrooms, opening wardrobes briefly, filming what was inside. The whole video was maybe 4 minutes long and had that quiet, deliberate feeling to it that made me sit forward in my chair without quite realizing I was doing it. I opened a second one. Different house, same thing. Slow, methodical, going through every room, filming the entry points, the door locks, where things were kept. There was a brief moment where whoever was filming paused on a bedside table that had a watch and some cash sitting on it, held the shot for a few seconds, then moved on. I sat back and just thought for a minute. I opened a third video, and this one was different. It was filmed from outside, from across the street, zoomed in on the front of a house. The lights were on inside. You could see a figure moving around through the window. Whoever filmed this just stood across the street in the dark and filmed someone moving around inside their own home without them knowing. I closed it and didn't open anymore. I'm not someone who jumps to conclusions, but it was hard to look at those videos and come up with an innocent explanation. The inside ones looked exactly like someone walking through houses and clocking everything worth taking and every way in and out. The outside one looked like someone watching a house while the occupants were home. Taken together, it looked like someone doing groundwork before breaking into properties. I rang the police that same night. They sent someone round the following morning. A plainclothes officer who sat at my kitchen table and watched the videos on the camera without saying much. He asked me a few questions about Ryan, what he looked like, the address, how the sale had been arranged. He took the camera with him as evidence and gave me a receipt for it. About 3 weeks later, I got a call from the officer. He told me they had looked into it and that Ryan was someone they were already aware of. He didn't go into detail about what that meant, but said the videos had been helpful and that a couple of the houses in the footage had been broken into over the previous few months. He said I'd done the right thing calling it in. He said I could collect the camera once they were done with it. I thought about Ryan sitting there relaxed on his sofa scrolling his phone while I tested the camera. He'd been completely unbothered. Either he'd forgotten the videos were on there or he just hadn't thought about it, probably used to wiping it and had just forgotten this once. The extra battery he threw in without me asking, the casual, easy manner. All of it had made him seem like just a normal bloke selling second-hand camera gear. The camera was eventually returned to me about 2 months later. I used it a few times, but it never felt quite right, and eventually I sold it on. To a camera shop this time. I still think about those houses in the videos. The people inside them going about their evenings with no idea someone had already walked through every room and clocked every window and every lock. At least 2 of those houses had already been broken into by the time I handed that camera over. I don't know about the rest. I hope they were all right. I genuinely do. It started with a simple enough transaction. I was selling my old PlayStation on Facebook Marketplace, listed it on a Wednesday evening with a few photos and a fair price. I had a few messages that night, the usual mix of lowballers and people asking if it was still available and then never responding when you say yes. But one bloke, called Lee, was straightforward, agreed to the price, no haggling, asked if I could drop it to him rather than him coming to me because he didn't have a car. He offered to cover the petrol on top of the price, which I thought was decent of him. I said fine, and we sorted it for that Friday evening. He gave me an address and a rough time, and that was that. Friday came and I drove over. It was about a 15-minute drive, normal enough area, a row of terraced houses on a long street. I pulled up and checked the address and knocked on the door. A young lad answered, maybe 19 or 20, and when I said I was there about the PlayStation, he looked genuinely confused. He said he hadn't bought anything. I showed him the messages and the address, and he looked at them and said that was definitely his address, but he had no idea who Lee was and hadn't agreed to buy anything. I apologized and went back to my car feeling a bit baffled. I messaged Lee and said I was outside and the person at the door didn't know anything about it. He read the message. I could see the 2 ticks go blue and then nothing. No reply. I waited 10 minutes and messaged again, still nothing. I drove home. When I got back, I sat down and thought about it, and the more I thought about it, the less sense it made. Someone had agreed to buy something, given me a real address, a real occupied house, offered extra money to get me to come to them specifically, and then gone silent the moment I arrived. Why would someone do that? My girlfriend said maybe he'd just given me the wrong address by accident, but he'd confirmed the address twice in the messages when I'd read it back to him to double check. And he'd seen my message saying I was outside and read it and said nothing. I posted about it in a local Facebook group that evening, not naming anyone, just describing what had happened and asking if anyone else had had something similar. Within about an hour, a woman replied saying almost exactly the same thing had happened to her 2 weeks earlier. She'd been selling a phone. A bloke had asked her to drop it off, given her an address, and when she got there, the people at the house had no idea what she was talking about. The buyer had gone silent. Then another person replied, a man who said he'd been selling a bike and had agreed to drop it off at an address, and when he arrived, the house was empty. The street was quiet and he'd sat outside for 20 minutes waiting before giving up. He said while he was sitting there, a car had driven past slowly twice, and the second time it had stopped just up the road for a minute before driving off. He hadn't thought much of it at the time, but reading the thread, it had stuck in his mind. That last one was what made it click for me. Someone was using Marketplace to find out what people were selling and then getting them to drive to a specific location at a specific time with the item on them. You know exactly what someone has, exactly what car they drive, because they've had to message you their description to find them, exactly what time they'll be there, and they'll be sitting alone in a parked car in an unfamiliar street waiting for someone who isn't coming. All the information you need handed to you through the chat. I reported it to the police and included all the messages and screenshots. I also reported the profile to Facebook. The officer I spoke to said it was a known pattern and that there had been a few incidents in the area of people being approached or followed after Marketplace meetups, though he was careful about how much detail he gave me. Lee's profile disappeared within a day or two. Whether Facebook took it down or he deleted it himself, I don't know. Nothing actually happened to me that evening. I knocked on a door, got confused, drove home. On the surface, nothing occurred, but sitting in that street for 10 minutes waiting and messaging someone who was watching those messages come in and choosing not to reply. I was exactly where someone wanted me to be, alone at night with a console worth a few £100 sitting on my passenger seat. I just got lucky that the lad answered the door and broke the whole thing up before I sat there long enough for whatever was supposed to happen to actually happen. I don't do drop-offs anymore. Public place, daytime, someone with me. Every time without exception.